Looks like we're going to get started. Well, thank you everyone for spending your time with us just before lunch. Today, I'm Matthew Tillman. I'm the founder of OpenEnvoy. And today we have a couple of our customers here to talk a little bit about the work that they're doing with AI transformation, but specifically how finance and IT partner in different types of organizations in order to deliver value to the business. And I'll spare you too many overviews on OpenEnvoy, but we help customers transform their financials to build autonomous workflows for AP, things like AP, AR, cash entry, order management, things of that nature. And I'm really excited about this stat. We've been coming to this Gartner show for the last 4 years, I think, and over the past 24 months, we've saved our customers $600 million in free cash flow through elimination of cash leakage. And we like to say we did this more with next buttons, without next buttons and cheap offshore labor. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. We are in autonomous finance. We've been saying autonomous finance for a long time, and now it looks like that's a good portion of this show, so we feel good leading the market there. A couple of years ago, Gartner overbilled us for this conference about $30,000, and we found it, and then they gave us a cool vendor award, so we appreciate the work that Gartner does as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my guests for introductions, starting with Sri.
Good morning, Sri Kantamneni. I'm the Chief Information and Digital Officer at Schreiber Foods. We're a $10-ish billion dairy and aseptic beverage manufacturer doing business in 95 countries. Prior to that, spent about 20 years at Cargill, another large food manufacturer. Interesting tidbit, there's a 70% chance that everybody in this room had something that we make in your breakfast today, but you just don't know it.
All right, Matt Besselman, nice to meet you all. I'm the Director of Finance Systems and Process Automation at Best Egg. We're a fintech. We focus on consumer lending. If you are in credit card debt, you need to consolidate. If you're just in a cash crunch, need some liquidity, you come to us. We're a private company. We do about $500 million a year in revenue. Been in my role for about 3 years now. Obviously, largely finance transformation focused. Prior to that, various FP&A roles over 15 years.
And today we're going to talk about how finance and IT work together to establish a roadmap, to chart a course for the organization to deliver business value. And you're both from very different size companies, of course. And I think that's really important to understand that there's a lot of similarities irrespective of the size of the company. But one of the things that we've seen over the past 5 years or so is IT organizations are taking more of a lead. Finance organizations are becoming more technical, sort of leveling up the skill set. And I'd love to hear, in your words, just sort of how you partnered with IT, Matt, on your side to sort of deliver this transformation in your business and how you're thinking about these projects.
Yep. So I use our CTO as a sounding board. I don't want to say I routinely have one-on-ones with him, but I meet with him periodically. I'm always running ideas by him, how I can, obtain resources from his organization, so we can kind of get things, on the roadmap. So that's, having that direct line of communication to leadership in the organization, huge help there. Having my boss, my CFO, my chief accounting officer that I kind of direct report into both, having them have those meetings with, the CTO and having alignment there certainly helps to drive things through the organization. I'll just, use one prime example. We just went through implementing OpenEnvoy, so we've been on their platform for 2 months now from an AP perspective, and it was such a light, I aligned all these resources from the technology side to get ready for this, and it was such a light lift. I needed them to enable OpenEnvoy in our Azure environment, and that was pretty much it. You guys, helped me build the API integration from our ERP. So, I planned for something much bigger, and it was a much, lighter lift than I anticipated.
And I think obviously it helps when you go in the room and you say, hey, this isn't going to cost you a lot, I suppose, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Sri, what about you when you were working with finance? Because I believe finance originally found us,
Yep.
or procurement, and then we sort of went through that process. How did that morph and change over time?
Yeah, I'd say, one of my primary focuses as I joined the company as CIO was letting the business drive priorities and value. So our finance function found OpenEnvoy to really solve a pain point. We have something called the value framework that we leverage internally. So there was a quick business case put together, but the finance function then led the assessment of vendors that could solve, that unmet need. And found the solution, then engaged IT to say, this is the solution we want to, run with. And it's been nothing but success since then. So what I love about that is that the business functions bring priorities, a quick assessment of the technology landscape in that space, and then IT is really an enabling partner. For us, that's meant a lot quicker time to value and better understanding of what the technology can unlock for that area of business. So in this case, our finance function is really driving use case development and continuous iteration of the solution set, which I think in this case helps both OpenEnvoy and our business yield value.
We're big on outcomes, and one of my big things internally is we talk about our goal isn't efficiency, it's shareholder value. So like how quickly can we get to shareholder value for our customers? But that's not always how projects start. When you started to look at companies like ours, and I think there are 22 of them or something like that in the RFP. When you start to look at companies like ours, what was the outcome in the beginning that the team was looking to achieve?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. I think what's really important kind of now going forward is break it down into three buckets. You've got ERP systems or transactional systems. You've got best, commercially available off-the-shelf systems, and then you've got customization. And we lived in a heavy ERP and customization world, and that was just becoming expensive to manage and maintain. And so the mandate, if you will, was to really simplify and get to necessary uniqueness where you need it as a business, and a global blueprint for everything else. And for us, OpenEnvoy really allowed us to get to a global blueprint in the AP, AR, cash management space. Michelle, who's leading this initiative for us in finance, would tell me that we got to benefit faster on this project than any other project that we've done over the last 24 months or so. And so that speaks to really understanding the core business process, not making it more complicated than you need to. And in OpenEnvoy's case, I think you just have a solution that meets 95% of our requirements set right out of the gates.
And was that the same for you, Matt?
Piggybacking, a lot on that, and you said just, cost of ERP and maintenance. So just, kind of just brief journey, what we went through. Came into my role like almost 3 years ago to the day. We have, one of the Gartner Magic Quadrant ERPs, not great for processing invoices. And we, didn't have any workflows set up. People were emailing invoices around the company to get approvals, and then sending them to AP to then manually log into our ERP. So I would call that like AP 0.0, if you will. 1.0, we engaged, a large consulting firm, third-party partner, to help us build those workflows within the ERP. There just wasn't enough flexibility with it. Invoices weren't getting routed to the person that they need to get routed to for approvals. It was causing confusion with workflows, the maintenance on it. So spent, a few $100,000 to get to that point, made it just moderately better. So I came to this conference last year, was in your seat, and I said, okay, I have a huge problem with AP. I need to solve it. Started talking to some of the vendors here, found these guys. The relationship evolved, and over the next few months, we looked at 4 or 5 other vendors, pulled the trigger with OpenEnvoy, very quick. You're talking 2 to 3 month implementation. And now, we've been live on it for 2 months, and I have invoices going to the correct approvers. We're not touching them anymore. All the data capture, fully automated. So it's been a really positive outcome. Everybody's happy with it. I have 100 plus people in the platform touching it. significantly fewer questions around workflow, should I be approving this? And then I think, just from like an efficiency perspective, we were somewhere between 1.5, 2 FTEs dedicated to AP, or probably, maybe a third of an FTE. So we've been able to redeploy, that bandwidth into other things around cash management and AR specifically.
When you guys are thinking about your work with us or your work with vendors generally, how do you think about that partnership and that collaboration externally versus internally? Because obviously employees have a desire to see certain outcomes and have a desire to work in a certain way, and then vendors, obviously, like us, we want to sort of push the boundaries of what we can do. I know, Sri, the way that we work together, it's very partnership driven. In fact, I think the AP product was purchased first, and then we built a cash application product within about 6 weeks because you had external vendor issues. And so how do you see that partnership?
Yeah, I think our job within the IT function is to be an enabler for the business, right? So I view every area of the business as a key customer and user of technology. As you said, I think, for the last decade, ERP programs have consumed, right, both the dollars and the time, people time of organizations, across the globe. And so when I came in, finding a solution that didn't do that, right, that didn't consume a lot of time but didn't necessarily yield the output was super critical. And what's been great about the relationship with OpenEnvoy is the business is really driving use case generation, deployment, and delivery of that value. IT is purely enabling that. And that to me is best case scenario, right? Because now the business has a high opinion of OpenEnvoy. So they're going to bring more use cases to you guys. I think that unlocks more value for the company. IT then can go focus on removing complexity in our ERP. We run a cloud financial solution that then manages a federation of on-prem ERPs globally. And OpenEnvoy is working inside of all of that in a highly integrated and highly efficient manner, right? You mentioned, how many people are approving invoices. We have 400 users that approve indirect spend in the company today. And up until deploying OpenEnvoy, we didn't really have good visibility to what that spend was, who was approving it, why were they approving it, do they need to approve it, right? And so we're able to get to simplifying processes and people because of the leveraging of OpenEnvoy.
And then Matt, when you mentioned the dreaded word consulting earlier, when you sort of work with an external firm like that, you very much have to partner with them and trust them. Yep. And then how is that sort of morphed now that you're working with a vendor like us?
Yeah, I would say, it was kind of their solution. They were the ones that understood the ins and outs of the ERP certainly better than I did. And they're, a trusted partner. And right off the bat, I just had an uneasy feeling of, this wasn't necessarily a solution that was going to work for us, but I kind of had no other choice. So we went down that route. I guess the good takeaway and learning from it, I saw what worked and what didn't work. So I knew, and deploying a different solution in that design, okay, this is exactly where, my pain points are. Here's how I'm going to remove friction from the process. So we're a fintech, you hear the word friction, removing friction a lot because we try to do that for our customers. So my customers, being 100 plus invoice approvers across the company, trying to remove that friction from their process, certainly, led to the outcome that I was hoping to get to when we leveraged the consulting firm in our ERP, that we just, unsuccessfully weren't able to get there. I think part of, fortunately working for a fintech, our culture is such that we're constantly iterating. So you kind of have, multiple bites of the apple to get things right. But when you're doing that with an ERP, it certainly, becomes very expensive. You kind of have one shot to get it right with an ERP. I think with a more flexible solution like this, it's much easier to iterate, as you grow and things change.
And what's that like? What's that conversation like? Because that's the collaboration that needs to happen, right? Finance and IT have to say, this thing didn't work. and they have to have that conversation. It didn't work. What was the outcome that we're trying to achieve? What is the outcome we want to achieve? And then, how does that feel? Like, just what was your experience going through that conversation of, we spent a couple $100,000, as you mentioned, and it didn't work out. What does that look like?
We have other initiatives across the organization. I don't think there's really too much finger pointing. I could always say, hey, you guys have been working on this major project for the last 3 years, and every year we are told it's going to deploy and go live. So I think everybody has some quote unquote failures. But I think just being transparent and owning it, it humanizes you, and people realize that, in that, I guess, moment of vulnerability, that, okay, yeah, builds, rapport and trust. And people, I think, are certainly, more willing to partner with you when there's less finger pointing and more emphasis on just, let's solve the problem.
That's something that we noticed about Schreiber as well, Sri, is that you had a custom solution built, and then you have something like this new AI technology coming in and replacing that custom solution. There's probably a lot of ownership and shared ownership on that custom solution. Can you give us an understanding of what that experience was like, especially you were 2.5 years into the job? Sort of, what did that conversation look like?
Yeah, I'd really describe it in two ways. One, I think the finance function demonstrated a bunch of curiosity to go explore and see, what was out there, different tools that were going to maybe solve the problem differently than traditional tools. So step one, there's got to be curiosity, and I think that can come from either the IT function or the finance function, but there's got to be curiosity. The second is the willingness to let go. In change management journeys that I've been a part of, the hardest part, even when there's great technology, is people's willingness to let go of processes. Even if they're broken processes, there's a challenge letting go of things. And we've demonstrated, I think, through the implementation of OpenEnvoy, that both the tech working enables a flywheel effect for more curiosity, right? And the fact that it works so well makes it easier to let go. And that too has a flywheel effect, right? So I think this, the world is only going to change more rapidly in the future than it is today. So every subsequent day, right, more change is upon us. And in that world, right, technology is continuing to evolve at a rapid pace. If we can encourage business users to let go of an old way of doing things or an old process or a broken process, and there's a genuine curiosity in making the thing that they're working on work, that together, I think, yields success faster.
We used to have this thing where we'd say, it was sort of dishonest, I'll just admit openly. It was like, we'll help your team be more efficient, all this stuff. And it's like, the reality is like, if you want to buy next buttons, go find somebody else. I'm going to eliminate 92% of your headcount. And we became very direct about it because we had these great customer references. But it's not like they get fired usually. In reality, they get up-leveled, they get put in a different position based on that curiosity. How are you noticing the organization responding to that change management? Because it's actually been very positive, I think, in both of your organizations. People have really taken to it.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think in every organization, there's a normal distribution of talent. And you're right, leaning into the notion that jobs, roles are changing, and there will be impact. I think it's up to the leadership in the organization and talent to determine what part do they want to play in that, right? If you lean into change and are willing to change, you're typically willing to learn something new and move to where the puck is going. If you resist it, right, then I think, yes, the specific tasks that you're doing are now gone, and so now what, right? And so I think about this in really simple terms, 3 buckets of people. Those that are gonna be all about learning the new thing and moving towards it. The messy middle that's trying to decide which way they go. And call it the bottom 10% that just wants to let go, doesn't want to let go, right? And is willing to go down with the ship as the violins play. And in my mind, you don't expend too much energy, on that bottom 10%. Focus on the rest of the 90.
And did you have a similar thing, Matt? Because I know we're a high growth company, so the reality is like you're understaffed anyways.
I'll use the prison analogy. You know, first day in prison, you're supposed to like attack the biggest, scariest person, and then nobody will mess with you, right? Sure. So I literally, went after my most change-resistant person in a position of leadership and influence and said, here's how this is going to alleviate problems. This is going to make your life easier. It's going to save your team, this many manual reclass journal entries each month, this many fewer questions, a lot of which you're getting around the current process. And kind of once I got her on board, and then just the outcome that we've seen in the last 2 months made her a believer. So now getting, I would almost call it a quick win. I think most people think quick win is something you're going to do in 2 weeks. Obviously it took a little bit longer than that. But I think that that's given me the ammunition now to go after the next thing, have her support on our next initiatives. And then I think that permeates through her organization.
I mean, change management is often something that you even outsource in and of itself with systems, right? Large consulting firms make a lot of money on change management. And so it's interesting to me that both of your organizations actually did this internally.
Yeah, I think having somebody advocate for something internally carries a lot more weight than having the consulting company come and tell you how good looks. I think most individuals, most companies know what good looks. And in our case, I think very quickly there was a recognition that OpenEnvoy was different than several other initiatives and projects that we had embarked on, right? And so I would offer that most organizations know what good looks like. So trust, the gut, trust what, the intelligence and knowledge of the people within the company are saying. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't a role for change management organizations to come in. I think that's more important in big, transformations like ERP. Yeah. But in this case, I think we're doing this grassroots and it's working a lot more effectively.
Yeah. I did remember a great quote from one of your teams, which was, I didn't know this was possible. And so I think them seeing that something is possible and getting real tangible value pretty quickly out of it is important in creating that impetus for them to be curious, for them to want to do more of this type of thing.
Yeah, to be fair, right, OpenEnvoy replaces 4 different solutions, one of which was, call it a legacy OCR technology, just doing basic document read capabilities. So take that plus what we're doing in AP, AR, cash management, plus what we're doing on the reconciliation side, plus what we're doing in the integration space. Like there's 4 capabilities that got replaced in one fell swoop. And so I think that's what they didn't expect, right? That there's this ability to replace multiple tools and be more efficient.
Yeah, it turns out a lot of the process is obsolete and of the tools that supported those processes are obsolete.
Raj mentions, or Sri mentions OCR. When I took over, we had an OCR tool that they had spent probably 2+ years developing, and it was never deployed in production. And we just continued to pay for it, and it was just the maintenance of it. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze, so it just kind of like died on the vine. We never used it, hence why we were seeing the manual invoice entry. So we were able to replace that as well, which led to some cost savings and just shrinking our vendor base. Always a good thing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get on to some results next. These are results that you've shared with us, which is very, very exciting to see hard numbers. Matt, why don't you take us through the best egg use case there?
Sure. We have probably approximately 400 or so vendors. I'd say across 130, 140 vendor managers. We don't have a procurement function. We don't have a procurement software. We don't have a head of procurement. We don't do purchase orders. We're a fintech. It's kind of the Wild West. I think we've put some business process in place now where there's some hoops to jump through. You just can't go sign a contract with anybody, which is good. So very, defragmented from that sense. What we found during implementation was, immediately 2/3 of our vendors same GL coding every month. We're actually now at 75%. So when an invoice comes into the platform, it does the data capture off the invoice. It's actually applying the GL coding to it. So 75% of our invoices we are not touching. The other 25%, just we might have a single vendor that maybe sends us 20 invoices a month, different departments, different GL coding. Those ones we still have a little bit of a manual touch to it. I think certainly something over time, we can work with you guys through matching to fully automate that. We just wanted to get up and running and deployed as quickly as possible, just to immediately recognize the value. And day one, I think everybody could see it across the organization. So that's just more from the end user, the vendor manager, people that are approving invoices. Internally, from an accounting perspective, we had a temp that was doing a lot of the work that we were able to let go, and then our other person who was 100% dedicated to AP, she's now down to probably somewhere between 20 and 30%. So we've been able to redeploy her and doing a lot of other tasks around cash management and AR. I've already had some preliminary conversations, with the team around what our next step could be with OpenEnvoy, and probably following a similar path to what Sri has done. So,
and then Sri, that's super exciting, by the way, results. And I love the fact that I think with any vendor, it's not just us, but any vendor, you really should realize that the modern capabilities are such that you can be up and running very quickly on even fairly customized work. I think historically in this space, it's like a 9-month uptime, a ramp time. And but you can start to get immediate value out of these technologies now. You don't have to wait 9 months to start to get value. And then I think the other thing that we noticed on the AP side is most of the vendors in the space, it's like you spend the 9 months and then you basically have to beg your suppliers to use it or it doesn't work, which is pretty unpleasant, honestly, to have any of those conversations. And so immediately you're at 100%. And I think the expectation for technology, not just for us, is for all vendors in this space to be up and running very quickly and without supplier input. And if they ask for supplier input, it's very old technology in reality. And then on the Schreiber side, the thing that was fascinating to me is, like I said, we did the AP deal, we're all very excited, and then your guys were like, hey, our bank and their partner is shutting down the service.
Right.
So we need a cash application product, STAT. And so we had the underlying technology, and we deployed it for you for the first time. I think it was up and running in 6-ish weeks, something like that. And then we kind of got back to the AP piece. We were doing it in parallel, to be honest with you. And what we're seeing on the AP side is spectacular. It's like 90% automation within a month. And that means no supplier input, no human correction, all that. What's the response been internal?
Yeah, I think you guys can read the stats. I think the response has been that we want to do more. So, the use case identification that has come out of these results is exciting and compelling. I'll give you an example. So, we're a food manufacturer, so we're shipping hundreds of trucks globally daily. And all of those trucks have certificates of analysis, bills of ladings, documentation that goes along with every shipment. The things that we can do in AP and AR have unlocked a whole bunch of idea generation of, hey, how do we automate some of those processes? So as a pallet comes into our warehouse, can we leverage the same computer vision capabilities that OpenEnvoy applies on AP and AR in the warehouse? And if that answer is yes, right, there's a huge unlock there. So for me, what's exciting as a technologist is we started in one vertical, and we're seeing application across a wide swath of our business, which is not just unique to OpenEnvoy, but unique to a lot of the startups and early stage technology companies that we're engaging with. There's just a speed to implementation that exists that I think is very different than the incumbents or the traditional, ERP large vendors that are out there that we're super excited about.
On that note, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. I wanted to say not only thank you to you, but thank you to everyone in the audience. If you would like to come by and learn more about it, I'll be at the booth. These guys will be rotating in and out throughout the afternoon, and you can speak to our customers and learn more. And additionally, I'm told we're giving away a drone, which are very exciting things, especially in the DC area. So please come by and hopefully you'll win a drone and take home a cool prize. Thanks to everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.